good.
You guys say they don't let you drive anymore.
Right, but I think like a year ago when people were doing those flights, they were flying, right? It's like a 45-minute flight.
I took a toothpick snapshot.
Is there? Yeah.
25 minutes on days.
Yeah. Yeah.
I would say.
All right, we got our work cut out for us today, gentlemen. But if anyone can do it, I think we can do it.
What's
We
paid?
got a little engine that could.
Let's ready.
Oh, we're gonna do it.
We're going swimming, baby.
We're on swimming in the Oh, good question. Huh?
Like Mustafa, you give an extra few minutes.
Oh, he was making this. Yeah, for sure. We got slichos. Everything is everything alignment. So hopefully we'll be out of here.
Well,
All right.
9-7.
I'm sensing Randy wants to start.
Stop it. Come on. Randy has all time.
A double.
He's got it.
Viter from Randy.
He's got it. Listen, he's got to get to his.
Single Viter day.
All right, we ready? Weiter, as the great Randy says, weiter.
To be honest with you.
Where we leave off? Oh, we did the Mishnah there. We went down.
This is gonna be the last and away we go of the year.
I'm a rock.
Tomorrow. Amar Rava. Yeah. All right. We are in the first wide line on Tzadi Ches. 8 is fine. Sure.
Yes.
All right, and away we go. Amar Rava Hayman de Zovinle Chavisa de Chamra. So let's just remind us as we were talking about. Purchasing wine from a fellow, and if it goes bad, so the guy's chai v'achrayis, but there's certain conditions such as that you can't have changed the the container, because perhaps when you're changing, you moved into your own kankanim, perhaps you damaged it, or let's say there's certain reasons why you purchased it that it should have lasted and it doesn't last, then you get your money back. So I'm a Rava, a person goes ahead and he sells a barrel of wine to his store, to a shopkeeper. We talked about the guys at the corner store. They sell the cheap wine that goes bad pretty fast. So he sells it to the guy at the corner store as I tell this a palga, a tilsa, in order to sell, and it goes bad, either a half it or a third of it. Dinu the mekabel mine. In other words, he has to go ahead and he's chayiv b'achrayis. In other words, it was sold to go be sold, slowly as people come by, and therefore it went bad too early. You knew I wasn't going to use it all at once. I was going to, sell a couple cups a day, and it didn't last. So therefore, you have to go ahead and provide it a full guarantee. It's also if you didn't change containers, but if you could change containers, then we saw earlier that once again, if you change the containers, perhaps that it was the changing of the container which caused it to heachmitz, to go to sour earlier. And also, also wasn't the market day. The market day, it's overrun by people. No, but let's say it was a busy Friday in the shuk, and he didn't manage to go ahead and sell, all the wine, and then it went bad the next week, early in the week. Well, that's on you. You should have, hustled and sold all the wine, and then you wouldn't have had this souring issue a couple days after the day of the shuk. The Amar Rava Haiman, the Kabul Chamra Daite, the Matele, their Pavasa, Devel Shvat, right? A person, he says, oh, we're going to go in business. So Mark and I are going to go in business. Mark has wine from his vineyard, and he says, "Yo, you're going to go to now. This is the Yama, right? The port, right? They're not striking. You can go to the port of Deville Shevet's name of the place. What was it? I don't think so, right?
No.
Did it?
No.
It'll probably affect everybody pretty soon.
$70 an hour they wanted.
Yeah.
I gotta go.
So anyway,
$70 increase.
So 70%. So
70%.
So he goes to to sell at the port. So Mark gives it to me to go ahead and sell at the port. It will take me a week to go there, because Mark knows, Yoel, there are good prices to sell over there. You bring it to the port, and we'll do good there. So we'll schlep it. And now this is basically a business venture. We go in together. Basically, we'll share the losses together. If we lose, but if we win, then we share the profits. So by the time I got there with Mark's wine, result, it went down. Price went down. Also, we're looking at a heavy loss. So Dinahu the Makabale, since it was, I was, carrying the container of Mark's wine, and Mark wanted me to sell over there, not sell it earlier because over there they had better prices. So therefore, the achrayus is on Mark, not me, and he has to cover all the losses. And the boiler question was asked, what about Havi Chala? Let's say, not I went there and the prices went down. Let's say I went there and it soured, it went bad. Samai, Samarle, Rav Hillel Ravashi, Kiavin, and Rav Kana, by the yeshiva Rav Kana, Amarle told us, Chalalo, right? If it turned to vinegar, then Mark is now responsible. Udelay Rabbi Yisrachin, not like Rabbi Yisrachin. Rabbi Yisrachin was the first opinion in our Mishnah who says that if it is the container of the seller or the owner, i.e. in this case, Mark's container. So you can give back to Mark and say, here's your container, here's your wine, it went bad, that's on you, Mark. But over here, so we say that Mark is not fully responsible, therefore it's not like Rabbi Yosef Rechanina. Or if you could me some different version, afilu chalo nami mekabel, or maybe even if it sours, and it does go bad, I could say, Mark, you're responsible for the losses. Why? Come on, who is that like Rabbi Yosef Rechanina? Like Rabbi Yosef Rechanina, who says that I can always go to the owner of the wine and say, you know what, here's your barrel, take your wine. If it's soured, that's soured on you, Mark. You'll go ahead and take the full hit of the losses. Fine. And then we said in the Mishnah, the guy says, hey, I want the old wine. So he got himself wine from last year. He says, really old wine. So turn the page. So Yeshua from last year's wine. So Tana, Umeshan. You got two more turn the pages. It's a Shem today. So Tana, we learn over there, Meishan v'haylech adachad. Right? When I say really old, it has to go ahead and so now it has to be from 2 years ago. So I was already in the third year up until Sukkot by the third harvest of the grapes. Naya Mishnah.
Naya Mishnah. Amen. Beautiful, beautiful. Wow.
We're just getting started, gentlemen. A person who goes ahead, he sells a place to his friend, he contracts a place to his friend. Mayor is very handy. I'll contract you a place with or he himself receives a place. You're going to go ahead and build me a certain building, right? A little honeymoon suite for my son to go ahead and live, on my property. Or Beis Almanois Levito, or a house of for his widowed daughter. So Baina, so how big is such a structure? We didn't go ahead and specify. So it has to be Baina Arba Amos Al Shesh, 4 by 6 Amos. That's what?
Stupid.
That's stupid.
They saw something about specifying how much you're selling.
Yes, that is right. But they just said a general house for that. So I'll go ahead and I'll build you that. So Divi Rabbi Akiva. So stupid as stupid does, right? Yeah. So he says, so Rabbi Akiva says you can build 4 by 6. And says Rabbi Shmuel, Omer, Rabbi's Bakari. Well, I thought you were talking about something else. I thought you were saying, but the fact that it's 4 by 6, right? Imagine 4 amos by 6 amos is your house. He says that's like a little barn or whatever it is. Sukkah. So, and therefore, but you will soon see that I guess they didn't live in such houses that we live in. And
based on market in
right.
That's the big difference in
so this seemed to be the standard. So he said this is Rav Bakar. He's right classes Rav Bakar. And speaking of which, a person wants to go ahead and build a barn house, right? It's 4 by 6. By his katan, you want to build a small new starter house, right? Instead of your Georgian, it is a sheish alchas. It's 6 by 8 amos. That's your house. And Godel, you want a nice big house, right? Forget about new construction. You get one that is chesel eser, right? You get 8 by 10 amos. That is yours. And tarklin, we'll soon see what a tarklin is, like some sort of pavilion. That's asar al-sar. That's 10 by 10, right? And I remember these are the guy contracts to go ahead and build something, but they did not specify, anything. And roima kachatzi arko v'chatzi rachwa. Its height is half the length plus half the width, right? So, for example, let's say it was 8 by 6. So 4 plus 3, right? 8, 4, right? 6. Half of that is 3, right? So 4 plus 3 is 7. So the height of that is 7 amos. So what's the proof of this? So like the Heichal we'll soon see was 40 by 20, right? 40 by 20, which is 20. Half of 40 is 20. Then half of that is 10, right? So 20 that is 30. The height was 30. So therefore, the example was the Heichal. Now,
what's the biggest amount we're doing in this way? What's the biggest house we're connected to the Mishnah?
Well, the biggest house we had was 6 by 8.
8 by 10.
Excuse me, 8 by 10. Thank you. 8 by 10. It was a house. Yeah,
It's not very big.
Right. Yeah.
20 feet.
3 bedroom apartment in this.
Yeah.
Right.
right. So, and what's the price for that? $1.2 million? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There you go. Right. So, very expensive. Right.
Go to Casas.
So Lamali Lamisna base. First of all, so Zakti so Lamali Lamisna base Chasanis Libano base Amanos Libito. Why did you specify just the son gets married, he can live by him, or if his daughter becomes a widow, she can live, on his estate. At least in base Chasanis Libano Vito, base Amanos Libano Vito, right? So let's say either one, his son or his daughter gets married, they can live in his property in a little house there, or if one of them becomes widow, they can live also in a house on their property there. It's like my answer is Agamilsa Kamashma comes to teach you something else. Deloy Darka. The chasna lemidar bechamua. It's not proper for a son-in-law to live, on the property of his father-in-law's house. I believe it becomes the mingling of the son-in-law and the mother-in-law. As the pasuk says, "V'sefer ben Sira hakshakalti." Yeah, what did you do? You did that last time. I think I'm very sure. Yeah, no, I think the last time we had this Gemara. You're talking about your mother-in-law. So we say over here. So it says over there, Sefer Sira. So I measured everything. I looked at everything in the world, but with a scale. The I didn't see anything, worse or lower than bran. However, what's less than bran? Is a son-in-law who lives in the father of his father-in-law's house. The kal mechas, it's even worse than become mechasin. What's worse than that? Become mechasin. As a guest who brings a guest, right? You invite me over for a meal, and so you prepare for one, and lo and behold, I come with another friend. And they call me Arech, and even a word lower than that is Meishiv Davar B'Terem Yishma, is basically answering before you even hear, right? Before you even hear the question, you're talking. Listen first, and then you respond, right? To respond before you fully out, Shinamaz Bask says, Meishiv Davar B'Terem Yishma, right? A person responds, right, before finishing hearing. So Velasi Lo B'Chlima, and such a person is like is foolish, and he will be embarrassed. And Rabbi Shmuel says, quote from the Mishnah, says, Rabbis Bakar Yizu, right, so you want to build 4 by 6? That's the cattle house, right, whatever it is. So Rabbis Bakar, Man Katani, so who wrote this part? It's a cattle house. So Rabbi Shmuel, some say it's Rabbi Shmuel who later on defines it. Katani Lavi, Kadami, Rabbi Kiva, and some say it's Rabbi Kiva who said you can do 4 by 6 and because it's Rabbis Bakar. And some say it's Rabbi Shmuel who basically argued, let's see. So Kadami to Rabbi Kiva, some say it was Rabbi Kiva, Katani Lavi, he wrote it. It says, that's how you read the Mishnah. Afal Pisha Rufus Bakar, even though something which is 4 by 6 is basically a cattle house, Pamim, Shadam writes, he said, Rufus Bakar. Nevertheless, there are times when a person says, you know what, this is all I need, and then he builds such a small house. Oh, good morning, Yigal, how are you? All right. So, yeah, we are in Sadi Chesam Days, right smack in the middle, right like over there.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
So you say over here, and some have a different version. Rabbi Shmuel Katani Law, we still have a blot to go. Rabbi Shmuel Katani Law says over there, V'hachi Kamar, and he says like this. No, you say 4 by 6. V'hachi Kamar, right? So last is Rabbi Bakar, Eiser Arba Amos El Sheish. He says 4 by 6. Speaking of 4 by 6, you know what 4 by 6 is? 4 by 6 is when you want to go ahead and build a cattle barn. And then we said Tarklin is Asar al-Asar is 10 by 10. So my Tarklin, what's that? So Kubasa Bevardi, it's like a pavilion that's full of roses and flowers, and it's very nice. That's a little pavilion where they go ahead and they chill. And Tani, the Kantir, by the way, I mentioned it in ad, you should add to that. If someone says a contract to build me a Kantir, then you make it 12 by 12. So my Kantir, so Tarbit's a Pundari. Right, it's basically like the courtyard area outside a large mansion. And then the Mishnah says, and what is the height? The height of these structures are half the width plus half the length. So Rami Kachatzi Arka v'Chatzi Rachla. And Ra'ila Dover, it says, the proof of the Mishnah, Rabbi Shimon is like the size of the Heichel. So Ra'ila Dover, who wrote this part? Ra'ila Dover, Man Katanila. So Ikadama, some say it was Rabbi Shimon Gamliel at the end. And Katanila, V'achi Kamar, that's what it means. Ra'ila Dover, what's a proof that the height should be half the width plus half the length? Right? Everything should be like the building of the Heichel by the base of the Heichel structure. And some say, right, the Heichal was the structure outside the Kodesh over there. And some have the Gadamri, some say the Tanakama wrote this. Rosh Gamliel, Atzmu Kamatami, and Rosh Gamliel is actually coming to argue. What do you mean? The Tanakama. So Raya Menayin, where do you say half the width, that the height should be half the width plus half the length? So Raya Menayin, Mibinyan Heichal, but it should be like the Heichal. So Atu Kuliyamo Kubinyan Heichal Abdi. I understand it was made of marble and precious stones. Well, everyone's house is made of marble and precious stones. So too, you can't learn from the dimensions of the Heichal because the Heichal was a special structure. So you can't learn out. So therefore, Rabbi Shimon is arguing that says that that is not necessarily true in terms of the height of the structure. And Tanya, right? The height should be like the beams, basically the width that goes across. Why don't you say, why you say like the beams, right? If the beams go like sideways, so just say the width, right? So Ibo is saying a base of right? That basically houses are built, the walls are very thick on the bottom and they go up. So the beams have to cover the full length of, there's more area on top between the top of the walls because the top of the walls are thinner there versus, down here, it's a little less. So therefore, if you say it's the width, then it's shorter than if it was, because the walls are real thick and, they go up like that. So therefore, they said it has to be like the beams, which are longer than actually the width on the bottom. No, where was it? Oh, and anybody say, Ma? I'm saying, find a Rabbi Garach. Oh, you say, basically, you say, in other words, that the beams are actually a little longer than the width. Why? Because they have to be inserted into the wall, so they go partially into the depth of the walls, and therefore the actual area in between walls is a little shorter or a little less than the length between the beams that get inserted into the walls. Rabbi Chanina. So he went out to the Kriyasa, to the different areas, out to the fields or to the villages. Rami Lake Krayadadi had two them. So you can see the one pasuk says, it was the house that Shlomo Melech built was Shishim Ama Arka, was 60 amos was his length. The Ashim Rachbo and 20 wide, Ushloishim Ama Komaso. Right? So see, then it says then it says the height was 30. So the height was it 20 or was the height 30? Right? If is the same height, so why was the height is it 30 or 20?
40.
Which one?
It's 40 different because 60 divided by 2 is 30.
So this was right. So this was the what's it called? Let's say this is by Shlomo. That was 1 second. That was the that was the Heichal outside. So the Heichal, it was like a T shape. Mm-hmm. So that was the Heichal was the part outside the Kodesh.
Right.
So there was the Heichal Kodesh and the Kodesh. Right. So that was like it was like right, and it was longer, I think, this way than it was that way, and it was like a T, right? So that we said like the poster here. Maybe even somewhere, maybe the other one. But basically, so that part was 40 wide, but the ceiling, right. They want to learn from there. So, but over here, so which was the height? Was it 30 or was it 20? So no, when they were measuring, it was actually from the tips of the keruvim, which were 10 amos above the ground, to the top, which was 20. So my Kamash, what's the come teach you? So Kamash Malon, turn the page, right? Kamash Malon. So Lamata Kilamala, that below, which is just like above, which is empty space. Malamala, just like above, there was nothing up there. Aflamata, so to below the keruvim, the tips of the keruvim, there was nothing there. In other words, the Aron, as we'll soon see, did not with the keruvim where they were found, right? So they were what's it called? The keruvim were on top of the Aron, and therefore, the Aron took up zero space Avad name mishamish klum. So Messiah the Rabbi Levi, Rabbi Levi, Rabbi Levi, Vitem Rabbi Yech, that Davar Zemesaris Biadenu. Right? This was something that was handed down to us from our fathers. Malcolm Aron Nukruvim Einaminamida. Those did not take up space in this world. Physically did not take up space. And Tani Amihach was a Sumsi, Aron Shas Moshe, Yesh Revach Eser Amos called Ruach Ruach. It was 10 Amos in each and every direction. Now, you can't have something, right, which takes up space, right, to be 10 amos in every direction if the entire width and length, right, is 20 amos, right? It has to be something in the middle, right? Even if I have this cup right here, let's say this wall right here is 10 feet and it's 5 feet. So halfway 5 feet is not to here, it would be right here. That means the cup would not take up any space. So too, the Aron where the Kruvim were coming out of did not take up any space. Tani Amihaki, so Amar Ravinai, Amar Shmuel, Kruvim, B'nei Hayomdim. The Kruvim say they stood with the miracle. Shenamar Pasuk says, "V'chamesh amos knaf hakruv ha'achas v'chamesh amos knaf hakruv hashenis." Each one had wings of 5 amos. So each one was 5 amos by 5 amos was 10. So Eser amos makes us klarav. So therefore, if you say like this, from the one end of the wing to the other end of the wing was 10, right? And 10 plus 10 is 20, and they stood with the width of 20. So the Gemara says, "Gufayu heichi havu kaini," right? So I understand if from one tip to the other, it's one thing if you have 2 wings next to each other, but there's a body in between the 2 wings. Where's that body? And furthermore, they're lined up next to each other to go 20 amos, but where's the bodies? It must be, right? It must be Gufayu heichi havu kaini. Ela shmamina, learn from here. Right, B'neis how you owned him. That they must have miraculously stood. Now comes a list of questions. So according to this, right, they stood side by side. The Kruvim were side by side, basically lined up like 2 people, lined up like next to each other, like in a line, like in a Red Rover, right? They're lined up next to each other, not necessarily facing each other, as we'll soon see later. So now we're gonna have a series of questions on this assumption. So mask, the whole proof was, they stood side by side next to each other and took up 20 amos where the body stood. So mask. So first of all, maybe they're side by side, but maybe the wings did not come out from the sides. Maybe like it came out from the back, like on a chicken. So therefore, it actually started. The tips of the wings were actually connected to each other where they began and growed out. And Maskiv, now it's like 5 or 6 questions. So Maskiv, Rava, Vitilma, Zesh, Loganegazet, Havikam. So maybe they weren't one next to the other. Maybe they were like, parallel to one another, and therefore they didn't need to line up exactly so the total was 20. And Maskiv, Ravacha, Bar Yaakov, Vitilma, Bachsunai, Havikami. Perhaps they stood in a diagonal. And as we know that a diagonal is longer than the width. So if you look at the one picture in the Rashbam, you'll see that the 2 wings going across is actually longer when you have in a diagonal. So that theoretically, even if they were tip to tip, it could fit in a diagonal. Perhaps also the Kruvim were higher up, so maybe like we saw earlier, walls get a little bigger as it a little thinner as it goes up. So maybe there was a little more space towards higher up than it was below. Right? And perhaps they were perhaps it was like bent a little bit. Okay, so they bent a little bit. What's the big deal? And perhaps they what's it called? They were folded over. Maybe they were crossed like this. They weren't like this. They were like this. And therefore, when it started from the 5 each wing, it started from the right wing went left and the left wing went right. So therefore, it could easily fit the space, even if it was 10. So therefore, your whole proof that B'nai Hayomdim is not necessarily a proof from the way you said that they stood. Now, speaking of the Kruvim and the way they stood, so case Hayomdim, how were they standing? One says they're facing one another. Some said they were facing back. Now remember, the Heichal, the Kodesh HaKodashim was right. You face west, right? It was west. That's the thing for a second, right? We face west, right? Yeah, face west, right? Western wall, right? You face west, right? Yeah. Right. So it was the west side, right? So basically, the Kruvim were facing back, Labayas, towards the Kodesh, right? Towards the where the menorah and the shulchan and all that were. So Laman, so v'chadav ishel achiv, v'chadav mar b'pnei labais. Laman yer b'pnei mishel achiv. So because the pasuk says b'nei mishel achiv, I haksiv b'pnei labais. It says their face of the kruvim were towards the bias. So lekasha kabi so shizman oisin so shamakom. That's when they were doing when Hashem listens and they were facing one another. And kabas len shein yisrael oisin so shamakom. But they were not facing when they're not doing what Hashem wanted. Then they would face towards towards the heichal over there. The one who says they are facing towards the bias, right? The proof of like facing, like man facing his fellow man. So Ran says the like they were angled towards each other and also towards the rest of the bias. The tiny is on the bias. Uncle Sager he says the kruvim ma'isa, right? They were something. They were looked like the sort of children and their faces were angled toward one another. Like someone who's leaving his rebbe. In other words, he's not completely facing away, and he's not completely facing his rebbe. He's sort of walking at an angle, where he doesn't turn his back to his rebbe, but he still sees where he's going. So that was also the kruvim. They're facing one another, also angled out. Fine. Naya Mishnah. Two more Mishnahs today. Quick ones. So Mayor goes ahead and he purchases a pit in my property, or we divided it in my property. Shachavero nichnas b'shash b'derech b'nei adam nichnasim. You can only go in during normal hours. Let's say during sunlight hours, 9 to 5, 9 to 7, whatever it is. Normal hours, you can't start entering my property at 2 a.m. The yaitz b'shash b'derech b'nei adam, he also only leaves when people normally it's time for people to to go to their pits. Yaitz b'nei machnis b'hemto, and you can't go ahead and bring your water. You want to give your cow to drink. Okay, go get a bucket of water and then bring it. Don't start bringing your animals into my property. And furthermore, mashka, bibara, and then you go ahead. You can't bring your animals to go ahead and bring from my pits. El mali mashka, rather you go ahead and fill up a bucket and go ahead and bring it. I will go ahead and put a lock on. First of all, Mayor he has a lock for the well or the pit that he bought, and I also have a lock to it. So the Gemara says, "Pesachas lehecha."
In a strange place, you think this should be in Mokras of ice? It seems nothing to,
Rights.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a whole. I think we're going through a whole list of things as well as the next one of what is established or what is assumed in these types of purchases. So Pesachas. So who? What the purpose of the key is? So Amar Rabbi Yechon, Shneim Labor. Both of them have a lock for the pit. Why? So Bishlam Balabor. I understand the case. Let's say Mayor bought the pit, and now Mayor has a lock for it. Brothers to Maya. Debore. He wants to go ahead and protect his well, his pit of water from me taking whatever I want because he's not around. Ela balabais, but why can I go ahead to balabais lamale? Why should I have a key to the pit? In other words, so I'm gonna Belzar Mishum Chashad Ishka. Because in other words, if I have a key and Mayor goes there, and if I don't have a key and Mayor can come and goes whenever he wants, and let's say I'm out of town and he's going there to go ahead and get water. They say his wife is home alone, he's out of town, Mayor's going there to fill up his well, right? So therefore, you can spread rumors. So road avoid rumors. I have a key, and therefore the balabais is the key, and therefore anytime the bor wants to go ahead and get his water, the balabais will be there. Fine. Now your mission. The Mishnah says, someone has a garden, right, inside the garden of his friend. So Alan has a garden in Randy's property. But Nicholas, so what's the rule? So Alan has to walk through Randy's property. So Nicholas, once again, and obviously they made a deal. He bought it, so therefore he has a right of way. So Nicholas Nicholas can go ahead only during the time zone it's normal for people to go. And also you can only leave when it's time for normal people to leave. He can't go ahead and start bringing merchants. Randy doesn't want all these strangers in his yard. You want to go ahead and sell his other vegetables. Go ahead and bring it out to him. Don't bring them in. And you can't go ahead and use the shortcut through Randy's yard to get to your yard to go somewhere else. No, you can only use it, walk through Randy's yard for the purpose of using your yard, right? For using your gita. And the outer end, who's allowed to go ahead? Zoyre esaderech, and Randy is allowed to go ahead, and the guy on the outside is allowed to go ahead and plant in the area, even though Alan's going to walk on it. It might make it a little more difficult on Alan. But Randy can't have claims why you walking on where I planted, and Alan can't say why you planting where I'm supposed to walk. He's allowed to go ahead and plant there. Now let's say they make an agreement. He says, you know what? don't go through my yard. You can go on the outside. It's more private. It doesn't come to my yard. It's a little bit outside. So they make a deal. They shook hands, or they make it whatever it is. They got a kinyan on that. Derech min hatzad. So midas shneim, it has to be both of them have to go ahead and agree to it. So Nicholas Joshua writes, and therefore, since it's not cutting through the middle of Randy's yard, it's around the outside. Therefore, Alan is allowed to go ahead and to enter when he wants. The Yaitse writes, and he can also leave when he wants. But he can go ahead and bring merchants there. However, but he can't use it for other reasons. In other words, yes, it was on the outside, and they compromised to go ahead and use it on the outside. However, it could still only be used for the purposes of this gina. And now, since there was a mutual compromise, neither one is able to go ahead and plant there. Since Randy made Alan walk around the outside, so therefore, basically, Randy is giving up the right to go ahead and plant there. But once again, Alan can't plant there because Lamaisa is still Randy's, was just given for walking, not for planting. So, Zak the Gemara, Shmuel, Amma. Now, let's say a person makes a deal. I want to go ahead and purchase through your yard, and I'm a base of shlachin. Right? I'm going to sell to you a little channel. You need it for your field to irrigate it. So you can have a channel from my yard. I'll sell it to you. So how much land is given? So nice on the base amos and so you have 2 amos is the width of the channel. And you have an am on each side for the banks of this little channel to go through. And let's say for his banks. And I'm a basic hill. And let's say the deal was not for your basic shlachin, your irrigated field, which needs more water, but let's say a smaller pond, a fish pond or something. I'm selling you a channel through my yard for the purposes of your fish pond. It's only 1 amos wide. And you only need a half amma for a bank on each side. The and those banks who can go ahead and plant this, Rabbi Yehuda or Shmuel, the owner of the field can go ahead and plant them, just like in the case of when Randy sold his field and Alan was able to walk through, nevertheless Randy was able to go ahead and plant on the field. So too, when I'm selling, right, you a little channel for your stream to go through, and this bank, nevertheless, I'm still allowed to go ahead and plant there if I choose to. Not only can I seed plants, I can go ahead and plant trees in that area. So the one who says you're allowed to go ahead and plant seeds, certainly you can go ahead and plant trees there. We'll soon see why. But you go, one says you can only plant trees. Why is that? You can't go ahead and plant seeds. Because seeds, plants don't go so deep, and therefore they will affect the banks. If they affect the banks, it will hurt the little channel of water. However, if I plant trees, it goes deep down into the earth, and therefore it does not affect the banks of this little channel of water. And therefore, there's no issue of me planting the trees. There's only issue of me planting vegetation. Let's say the washed, it overflowed, and so, and then all of a sudden the banks got washed out. So so let's say, right, I sold a portion of my field for someone else to have a little stream of water, and it overflowed and it ruined the banks. So he needs dirt now to create new banks. So he's allowed to go ahead and take it from my field. Because we know that whatever dirt was there basically washed up add to my field, so you can go ahead and recollect dirt from my field to make the banks of your wall. So right? Maybe it washed it away. Maybe the land, the earth did not end up on my land that it's surrounding it. Maybe it washed it all the way down and it's downstream and it has nothing to do with my land. Stop taking my earth. Papa, keep it all the no, because the condition was, once it says you can go ahead and create this little channel of water, basically it was an agreement that if it does get washed out, you're able to go ahead and take earth back from my field to recreate the banks for your little channel of water. All right, we'll stop here at the Mishnah. Everybody have a wonderful day. And tomorrow, Be'ez Hashem, we will continue from here.